Sex, drugs, and hitting your brother in the head with a cricket bat. Now that's rock and roll, baby. In between all the yelling and sometimes literal fighting, these rowdy folks somehow managed to make some pretty great music. Despite all of their success together in the late 1970s, it was clear by 1985 that either guitarist Eddie Van Halen or singer David Lee Roth would have to go, and they didn't name the band Lee Roth. Seeing the writing on the wall, Roth abruptly left Van Halen to pursue a solo career. Though his sudden departure left the band in a bind, Eddie wasn't too upset about letting the door hit Roth on his way out, saying to Rolling Stone, 12 years of my life putting up with his bull, he left us hanging. Whether or not karma was involved is unknown, but Roth's solo career was not as successful as he'd hoped, while the band he ditched went on to reach further heights with Roth's replacement, singer and guitarist Sammy Hagar. It really did. The second era of Van Halen was an undeniable success, so of course Hagar was fired from the band in 1996. Roth made sure to let Van Halen know he was available, and he eventually rejoined the band, though that went about as well as it usually does when someone gets back with their ex. To make the whole mess even more complicated, Hagar and Roth then teamed up for a joint 2002 tour. Hagar returned to the Van Halen mix for another 2004 reunion tour that went about as well as all the others, and he once again exited. Finally, the will they, won't they of it all ended when Roth permanently returned to the band in 2007, where he remained until Eddie passed in 2020. Already one of the most popular folk pop acts of the late 1960s, Simon and Garfunkel released their best-selling album Bridge Over Troubled Water in 1970. When you're weary. And Paul Simon certainly was. Ultimately, Art Garfunkel wanted to be a movie star. He pitched a plan to Simon that essentially would have Art shooting movies half the year while Simon worked on a new album, and then Art would come in and record his vocals. Seeing as how the plan boiled down to Paul does all the work, Simon wasn't on board, and the relationship between the former BFFs was never the same. A hugely successful reunion concert in 1981 spurred plans for a full-fledged tour, but the fractures had set in too deep and the idea was scrapped. Not even time could heal these wounds, as Garfunkel was still referring to Simon as a, quote, jerk in 2015, telling The Telegraph, "I created a monster." There are at least two true things when it comes to Beach Boys founder Brian Wilson. First, he was a musical visionary. It would have indeed been nice if we could wake up to Brian not feuding with his cousin. You see, he did not get along with his bandmate Mike Love. In case you're wondering, Love's mother was a Wilson. That's how they're cousins. Anyway, among their well-documented feud, the perhaps most notorious incident occurred in 1977. During a show at Wembley Stadium, 15,000 fans were treated to both a Beach Boys performance and an amateur WWE show. At one point, Love became so furious at Wilson that he hurled a piano bench at him, though it didn't make contact. So, over the years, Love pivoted to a financial smackdown instead, repeatedly suing the band and even Wilson for defamation, winning a $1.5 million settlement. In keeping with the wrestling antics of throwing a bench, Love has made peace with his role as the villain in the Beach Boys story, though his version of events would be told a little bit differently. As he wrote in his memoir, "For those who believe Brian walks on water, I'll always be the Antichrist." Brian and Mike did reconcile a few times before Wilson's passing in 2025. Love commented that the two were inseparable, both in life and afterlife. "You wanted the best, you got the best. Kiss." Delivering larger-than-life stage spectacles with their solid rock hits such as Strutter and yeah, that one. The original lineup featured Gene Simmons on bass, singer and guitarist Paul Stanley, lead guitarist Ace Frehley, and drummer Peter Criss. It was a four-part union that was the best and not getting along. In 1980, Criss was fired when his drug and alcohol misuse got so bad that a session drummer had to be brought in to complete an album. Anton Fig, famously of David Letterman's house band, played drums on all of Unmasked, but Peter still made the music video. Frehley exited soon after due to similar issues. We get it though. We wouldn't want to be in a band with Gene Simmons either. It's not like you can critique Gene. You know what he doesn't have?
Oh my gosh, it's thick skin. Okay.
Although both eventually returned for impermanent reunion stints over the years, the bad blood they had with Simmons and Stanley has lingered, culminating in the band even making the rare move of not performing when Kiss was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 2014. It wasn't exactly difficult to figure out why, as the sniping at each other has continued over the years. As Simmons said in a 2019 interview with Guitar World, Ace and Peter have gotten 3 chances. They were in and out of the band, fired 3 times, for drugs, alcohol, bad behavior, being unprofessional. They weren't carrying their load. Fraley responded back with an older person's favorite method, a scorched earth Facebook post where he blasted both Simmons and Stanley as, quote, untrustworthy and control freaks. Gene put his grievances aside and met up with Peter at Ace's October 2025 funeral, which was the ultimate end of any future reunion. In between all their fighting, brothers Noel and Liam Gallagher managed to put out a few hits with their band Oasis.
You're my wonderwall.
Their sibling relationship has become legendarily characterized by nasty remarks, non-stop sniping, and even a notorious incident in which Noel bashed Liam in the head with a cricket bat. In addition to his athletic prowess, Noel also managed to provide an all-time quote when describing Liam. Noel said of his brother during an interview with Q, "He's the angriest man you'll ever meet. He's like a man with a fork in a world of soup." Oasis split up when Noel quit shortly before a 2009 performance in France, explaining in a statement that he simply couldn't work with his brother for even a day longer. For the next decade plus, their personal battle became the coldest of cold wars, constantly throwing barbs at each other. People still couldn't help themselves from asking about a possible Oasis reunion, something that Noel insisted would never happen, once saying to The Guardian, "It boils down to, on a personal level, him." But in August 2024, climate change must have finally provided a cold day in hell as the brothers announced they miraculously settled their differences, and Oasis reunited for a tour in summer 2025. Did they fight? Yep, but they made it through without any more cricket bat incidents, so that's one thing we got. Another brotherly band that ended bitterly, Ray and Dave Davies formed the Kinks and promptly took their spot at the forefront of the British music invasion in the mid-1960s.
You really got me going. You got me so I don't know what I'm doing.
It's like Ray was talking to Dave there. This wasn't a case of fame causing the relationship to fracture, as it seemed to just be good old-fashioned brotherly hatred. As Dave once told The Telegraph, "I think Ray has only been happy for 3 years of his life, the 3 before I was born." After decades of public squabbling, the band split up for good in 1996, and the relationship between the siblings remained frosty for years, with Dave telling the Daily Mail in 2010, "Ray's an ass. You've heard of vampires? Well, Ray sucks me dry of ideas, emotions, and creativity. It's toxic for me to be with him. He's a control freak." But as time has gone on, it appears that the feud has softened a bit. Ray told The Times in 2024 that while the two lived on 2 different continents, they were finally back on speaking terms, summing it up by saying, "The band, though, it's like family. You argue a lot and you fight, but you love each other, really." Pink Floyd made one of the most culturally and commercially significant albums of all time with 1973's Dark Side of the Moon, an undeniable, monumental achievement. After following Dark Side with other successful albums Wish You Were Here and The Wall, bassist and primary songwriter Roger Waters looked over their work in the mid-1980s and essentially said to himself, "Yeah, I think we're good now." Sort of like the song.
Every girl comfortably numb.
In a 2004 interview with Uncut Magazine, Waters also admitted that prior battles with guitarist David Gilmour contributed to his decision, saying, "I had decided the band had run its course as a creative unit. Dave and I were always slightly at loggerheads." Those loggerheads apparently grew over time, as Gilmour provided a pretty definitive answer when The Guardian asked about a potential reunion in 2024, saying, "Absolutely not. I tend to steer clear of people who actively support genocidal and autocratic dictators like Russian leader Vladimir Putin and former Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro." Among the revolving door of members who adopted the Ramones stage name, the relationship between Joey and Johnny Ramone was rumored to be rough from the start. Add in the fact that Johnny married Joey's ex-fiancée, and you've got a recipe for bandmates barely talking to each other.
Hey, oh, let's go! Hey, oh, let's go!
And they did, for the sake of the band. The band's manager, Monty Melnick, explained the situation to the New York Post by saying, "They came to an agreement where they kind of tolerated each other. It's like a business. You're working with someone you don't particularly like, but you're still working there because you like your job." Joey passed away in 2001. Johnny didn't attend his funeral, saying that he wouldn't want Joey at his own. Johnny passed away in 2004. Following the death of singer Ian Curtis by suicide, the other members of the band Joy Division made the decision to continue, although with a rebranding to the name New Order. The band continued to find success up until 2007 when bassist Peter Hook left the band after reportedly clashing with the rest of the group, particularly band co-founder Bernard Sumner. The group split up before ultimately deciding to come back together, but without Hook.
There's nothing I regret.
Hook basically said, "We'll see about that." He sued his former bandmates for allegedly costing him millions, eventually settling in 2017. But the feelings between them were anything but. When interviewed about the band before we get into this, Hook said, Anyone watching it would think, oh my god, look at them, they've got everything. They've got success, they're feted, what a wonderful world. And yet, really, we hated each other. Some fires burn brighter than others, and in the case of the Sex Pistols, they were an absolute deadly, towering inferno. They were infamously popular in the 1970s, both for their incendiary punk rock and the saga of bassist Sid Vicious, who overdosed shortly after being charged with murdering girlfriend Nancy Spungen. But as far as feuding bandmates go, that mainly comes from the band versus Pistols frontman Johnny Rotten, aka John Lydon. The animosity wasn't exactly a secret, something Lydon spoke about at a press conference announcing a 1996 reunion tour, saying, "We still hate each other with a vengeance, but we found a common cause, and that's your money." Nearly 3 decades later, the rest of the band decided that they'd like more of people's money, but this time they wanted it without having to deal with Lydon. The singer may not have liked the other members, but he liked being left out even less. When appearing on the Classic Album Review podcast, Lydon complained about the band performing the songs he wrote without him, saying, "They profess their hatred for me, but they can't live without me. I am the punishment that goes on giving." Though the members each had their share of gripes with one another, the most well-known Fab Four feud was between one of the most legendary songwriter duos of all time, Paul McCartney and John Lennon. After McCartney released his second solo album, Ram, John Lennon responded with the single How Do You Sleep, with pointed lyrics such as, "The only thing you've done was yesterday."
I believe in yesterday.
Lennon didn't just hide his burns in song lyrics either, as he blasted McCartney's ego in a 1971 Rolling Stone interview, referring to the Beatles documentary Let It Be the previous year by saying, "That film was set up by Paul for Paul. That is one of the main reasons the Beatles ended. I pretty damn well know we got fed up of being sidemen for Paul." As for McCartney, he was simply glad to be done with all the arguing. When asked about Lennon and his wife Yoko Ono for the book Paul McCartney many years from now, Paul responded with, "Thank God they're not in my life anymore. It was all very acrimonious and bitter." But though the story ultimately ended tragically with Lennon's murder in 1980, McCartney later revealed to GQ that the two were on good terms before his death. There are now only 2 surviving members of the iconic band The Who, and it happens to be the 2 who don't like each other. The battles between singer Roger Daltrey and guitarist/songwriter Pete Townshend have become the stuff of rock legend. There have been the usual nasty comments over the years, but the 2 turned things up to 11 when Townshend once took a swing at Daltrey with his guitar, ignoring the age-old advice of never bring a guitar to a fight with Roger Daltrey's fists.
We don't get fooled again.
And he wasn't. Daltrey clocked Townshend so hard that he was briefly worried that he killed him. But after the relief of finding out that he wouldn't have to dig a Townshend-sized hole in the woods somewhere, the 2 came together and continued not to like each other. Though the anger has cooled over the years, it's not as if the 2 are making friendship bracelets for each other. As Daltrey admitted in a 2022 interview with Forbes, "Our relationship is a working one, and that's about as far as it goes." It's a tale as old as time. Boy and girl join a band, boy and girl start a relationship, boy and girl join a band, break up, remain bandmates, and put out decades worth of hits while continuing to actively hate each other. Well, at least that's the tale of Fleetwood Mac. Stevie Nicks and Lindsey Buckingham continued performing together after their breakup, but their coexistence wasn't exactly sunshine and rainbows. This was highlighted by Nicks once performing Silver Springs, the song she wrote about the end of their relationship, directly at Buckingham during a live performance. Awkward. But even with all that, the group continued on until 2018, when things finally blew up at the annual Music Cares benefit ahead of the Grammys. Shortly after, it was revealed that Buckingham was fired from Fleetwood Mac after a either he goes or I go ultimatum from Nicks, who said, "I dealt with Lindsey for as long as I could. You could not say that I did not give him more than 300 million chances." Later interviewed by the Irish Times, Buckingham said he was very willing to rejoin the band, though that doesn't seem likely, unless Nicks is willing to give him 300,000,001 chances. A word of advice to any bands dealing with a little infighting: don't get politics involved. Glenn Frey and Don Felder of the Eagles were long established to not have been on the best of terms when the band agreed to perform at a benefit concert for U.S. Senator Alan Cranston, and it didn't go too well. Frey felt that Felder had acted disrespectfully to the politician, leading to some extremely tense moments during their performance. He recalled the experience for the book The Story of the Eagles, The Long Run, saying, "We were on stage and Felder looks back at me and says, 'Only 3 more songs till I kick your ass, pal.' And I'm saying, 'Great, I can't wait.' We're out there singing Best of My Love, but inside both of us are thinking, as soon as this is over, I'm gonna kill him."
take it easy.
And they did. Well, in a sense. Since neither member wanted to go to prison for murder, they decided the next best thing was to break up the band instead. Things remained icy between the two for over a decade before they reunited in the mid-90s for the massively successful Hell Freezes Over tour, proving once again that money solves everything, or at least most things. Felder was still on the outs with the rest of the band, and he was ultimately fired in 2001. Felder very calmly responded with a series of lawsuits, alleging that Fry and Don Henley were taking home a bigger share of the profits than he was. He eventually received a settlement offer in 2007, and things have been relatively quiet since. Apparently, the main addiction for the band, Jane's Addiction, was performing together. They split up in 1991, only to get back together again and again. They just couldn't quit, even if every reunion ended with the band angrily going their separate ways for a while. They reunited yet again in 2024, but the sudden ending of that reunion doesn't bode well for future get-togethers. You know what happened next. In the middle of their performance, they were ending a song when frontman Perry Farrell began aggressively bumping into guitarist Dave Navarro. The first bump could have been taken as the energy of the music getting the better of him, but Perry continued to get in Navarro's face to the point that the other members had to intervene. It quickly became apparent that this was far from good, clean fun on stage. Performing with a lead singer who might attack you at any moment doesn't sound appealing. So after the incident, the band promptly canceled the tour they were on, with Navarro blaming Farrell in a statement on Instagram writing, "Our concern for his personal health and safety, as well as our own, has left us no alternative. We hope that he will find the help he needs." For anyone who was unaware that things weren't all well and good in the land of Hall & Oates, they may have been shocked when Hall filed legal action against Oates to prevent him from hauling his half of a holding company they co-owned, Whole Oates Enterprises, to a third party. Legal documents indicated that in 2022 they began severing their professional ties and dividing assets, which is when Oates began making overtures to sell. That then resulted in Hall taking out a restraining order against his former partner. Speaking with Billboard, Hall dashed the hopes of any Hall & Oates shippers out there, insisting that the duo were nothing more than touring partners. Hall also went on to insist that it was Oates who said he wanted to end things, recalling, "I said, okay, but the problem is Oates didn't make the partying and breakup easy, and that's where the difficulties lay and still lay, and that's all it is." When Oates appeared on Good Morning America, the good news was that he actually agreed with his former bandmate. The bad news was, what they agreed on was that they weren't friends and they never worked on music together.
The only thing we did together was play concerts where we just went out there and trotted out the hits.
If there's one thing we've learned so far, it's that if you're a musician and a pair of siblings ask you to join their band, you should know that it's probably not going to end well. Yeah, pretty much. Chris and Rich Robinson formed the Black Crowes together, and here we are. As Chris once admitted in an interview with Esquire, Rich and I are famous for being at each other's throats, and that's very true. It didn't take long after the band broke up in 2015 for things to start getting ugly in a legal sense. In a statement announcing the band's dissolution, Rich accused his brother of demanding that he relinquish his equal share in the band's profits, while also requesting drummer Steve Gorman do the same and instead be paid a salary. In the following years, he accused Chris of being greedy in various interviews and kicked aside the notion of a reunion during an interview with WBAB, saying, "I don't have a brother anymore. I haven't spoken to him in 4 years." And just as everyone expected, the two appeared on the Howard Stern show together. Surprisingly though, it wasn't to wrestle in a pool of jello or anything like that. Instead, the pair announced that the band was reuniting and going on tour, thanks in part to Chris owning up to his mistakes.
You said some bad things.
I was in a negative place, but you know what? I've apologized to Rich about that.
When Crosby, Stills, and Nash added Neil Young to the mix, they didn't just form an iconic supergroup. They also supercharged the consumption of massive amounts of drugs. Things weren't always kosher between all the members over the years, but things essentially ended for good in 2014 when David Crosby decided to voice his thoughts on Neil Young dating actress Daryl Hannah after divorcing his wife.
I wanna live with the cinnamon girl.
So he did. And Crosby famously told the Idaho Statesman about Young, "I happen to know that he's hanging out with somebody that's a purely poisonous predator now." Crosby attempted to mend things when he appeared on Howard Stern to publicly apologize, but Young either didn't care or he doesn't get around to watching Stern much. It also didn't help that Graham Nash also had issues with Crosby, saying in an interview with Dutch magazine Lust for Life back in 2016, "I don't like David Crosby right now. He's been awful for me the last 2 years, just awful. Unfortunately, time ran out on any sort of reunion when Crosby passed away in 2023. As it should be evident by now, plenty of bands break up for one reason or another. So when Talking Heads frontman David Byrne told the Los Angeles Times in 1991 that the band was no more, it may have been upsetting, but it wasn't exactly a shock, at least not for fans. To his bandmates, though, the news was a huge surprise because they had no idea that the band was apparently done. The first that husband and wife bandmates Tina Weymouth and Chris France heard of any kind of splits was when a fact checker from the Times called them up to seek confirmation. After being completely blindsided in such a public way, neither of the spouses were too happy with Byrne, as Weymouth once told Far Out, "You know, he's a very weird guy. You could be a bully, but you couldn't do it to him. You could be unfaithful, but you have to be loyal. It's very Trumpian in a way. David never cared about people." Byrne had a chance to respond during an interview by People the following year, dropping a bomb of a rebuttal against Weymouth, namely that he agreed with her. He conceded that he had taken a tyrannical approach to the band, admitting, "As a younger person, I was not as pleasant to be around." That's one way to put it. Meanwhile, France has observed that Byrne's public persona has softened over the years, though he was wary that it came simply out of some kind of personal growth, or even that it was true at all. As he told The Guardian, "He's like Mr. Rogers now. It's true that his public image has changed, but friends of mine assure me that he hasn't."